Hi Karen, how's it going?
I'm well, Michael. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. I asked you to come on to the polling station just to tell us about something you wrote in an article recently in the Independent. And there was a really amazing statistic inside that article, but I'll let you explain it to the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, it was really about women's engagement because a lot of the sort of mainstream media, certainly down south, were talking about how people are totally disengaged and folk aren't going to vote. And I did a wee bit of digging about because that didn't feel like my experience here. And there was a couple of polls that TNS did. One of them saying that only about 55% of women in the UK were certain to vote in the general election. Now that figure would include women in Scotland, but there was another poll done for Scotland alone, and it was something like 74% of women in Scotland were certain or pretty sure to vote, which is a massive difference. And I think that's reflected in terms of young people in Scotland as opposed to the rest of the UK, and men as well. It's like two different countries in terms of I think people here are still excited, they're still switched on, and there doesn't feel like there's a voter apathy here at all.
Doesn't seem like there's the same sort of resignation that you might find down south as well. And it's a very positive development.
Absolutely, and I think what's been angering me an awful lot is the attitude that this is some kind of a protest in Scotland, or that we're almost like being irresponsible children, that once we see sense and calm down again, everything will be okay. But if you take that analogy, at no point do you tell your children it's time to stop thinking for yourself now. And to me, it just seems like we have had this, okay, some people might say navel gazing period, but we've been looking at the Constitution, we've been looking at how we're governed, we've been looking at power really, really closely. And you can't unlearn the things that you learned over the last year. And I think that's why people are so switched on, women in particular, because during the referendum we had so much opportunity to stand up and be heard, talking about how politics affects every aspect of our lives. And I don't think anyone, once they've had that experience, wants to switch it off and go back to being in our box or examining our cereal bowls like the Better Together lady told us. I just don't think that's going to happen.
That again is a very important part about going back in the box. You see, the way the narrative is now going is before the referendum, it was, come, we want you to be a part of the process, stay with us, make a contribution, and be part of this bigger thing. And then when Scotland, it seems at the moment, is going to choose to be part of it in a way that it hasn't done before, it's, oh no, you can't do that, that's out of order, that's not your place to be doing this.
It's the ultimate irony, and again, it makes me think of how you raise children. That there's this sense of, yes, we want you to be independent minded and think for yourself, and be a valuable part of this family, but woe betide you if you don't follow the family line and behave the way that the powers that you expect you to behave. And I just think we cannot possibly be part of a democracy where we were told that our voices counted and that we should stay and work within the system. And then when exactly that thing happens and we begin to use the system, we're seen as the most outrageous, most dangerous people on the planet. And the rhetoric that's coming out just now is just absurd, particularly from a woman's point of view. I think the monstering of the First Minister, I find that really offensive.
There has been some really nasty stuff, everyday sexism type stuff, like the, scantily clad on a wrecking ball. But then there's also been rather bizarre elements to it, like the doll stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just become ludicrous now. And I don't know, I felt towards the end of the referendum campaign last year, we were in the same zone that things were becoming ludicrous. And it felt in my little yes bubble that we were armour plated and we were marching ahead, and those things were, missiles were flying off and they weren't affecting us anymore. But clearly, we didn't get a yes vote. So it worries me greatly that what I feel in Scotland has been a liberating, really exciting process is, and it's kind of new way of thinking about politics again. It's politics just in the everyday, and that's been kind of bashed as well, and that sense of entitlement that we rightly had about the people decide. All this rhetoric about when a next referendum will be. That's not for any politician to tell me that I can't ever have another referendum about my country's independence. But there is this sense that we're kind of all been shoved back in and a lid put on us, and we're just not allowed to express ourselves. And it's becoming that anything that's remotely out with the tight two-party system we've had, any expression of wanting something different is seen as subversive in some way.
And what do you think is likely to be the effect in Scotland and also down south of this monstering as you described it? Do you think that the scare tactics are going to have the same effect this time, or people are more immune to it?
I honestly don't know. I mean, the polls have been consistent in Scotland, haven't they? Nothing seems to be wavering, the surge towards the SNP, and that is an expression, I guess, of people who were either yes or no, both sides kind of what would happen, to be honest, after the referendum, coming together. Maybe not in the way we had anticipated, but it's like we're, I don't know, being bashed on both sides, and trying to sort of almost circle the wagons and look after ourselves, and that is not, again, a healthy sign of what a union should be about. Nothing has been demonstrated since September that shows me that this is a balanced, fair, and representative union that actually listens to all its constituent parts.
I'd have to agree with you there. And on that, we'll wrap it up for this one. Thank you very much for coming on, Karen.
No bother. Cheers.
Watching the Andrew Marr Show is a great way of getting a hangover, even if you haven't actually been drinking. It's got an intoxicating title sequence with a subliminal message, "Hey, look at this hip and quirky guy," as action man Andy buzzes past London landmarks on his turquoise scooter to the accompaniment of a jazzy wail with urgent diddly-dum undertones. However, in almost no time, your head begins to throb with disappointment as his first guest appears, and it becomes crashingly obvious he's forgotten to think up any questions. This week, Andy sat like an utter Burke, offering no challenge, as Boris Johnson, looking more and more like the bastard offspring of Caligula and the Honey Monster, accidentally on purpose mangled the SNP's name 3 times. "The Scottish Nationalist Party," trumpeted the blonde bombshell, in that schoolboy prankster fashion that's made him the idol of the Conservative-tosser party. Boris's tour de farce marked another stage in the Tories' ramping up of anti-SNP hysteria, which now includes posters in English marginal seats showing Alex Salmond as a pickpocket. Abandoning conventional electioneering in favour of outright slander is a time-honoured Tory tactic, and it's much cheaper than employing a whole bunch of researchers on 0 hours contracts, so it's a win all round. Pundits agree, probably because they've all read the same press release, that this approach is cutting through to swing voters who are deserting UKIP and going back to the Tories, simultaneously lowering the average IQ of both parties. The Mail on Sunday, the preferred newspaper of the party's goose-stepping wing, is playing an increasingly strident role in this demonising of democracy. Its headline, the runaway winner of terminological inexactitude of the day, was also, in its own fashion, a major scoop. We all knew Theresa May was a feckless Home Secretary with terrorists running rings round her, but who'd have thought she'd also turn out to be a head-banging fantasist who thinks the abdication was a bigger deal than World War II?